So, as everybody knows, Mount Everest is the tallest mountain in the world. And the great news is, you can actually walk to the base camp. You don't need to be a specialist mountaineer or a climber. You can trek to Everest Base Camp. The Mount Everest Base Camp trek is one of the most famous treks in the world, and many people do it every year from all over the world. I did this trek back in November 2018, and I have to say, it is one of the best experiences I ever had in my life. It is a phenomenal trek. The feeling of achievement when you actually reach the base camp, seeing Mount Everest up close and personal from the bottom, the sheer size, the images, the colors, I will never ever forget that time. It was so amazing. It's one of the best things that you can ever do.
It's just something magical about the presence of this mountain. It's hard to describe on the video unless you're actually here. It's just awesome.
And as you can see, Nepal is just there. That is where Mount Everest is. It is right where Nepal meets China. It's on the Nepal-China border. So it starts in Lukla. Can you see Lukla? That's Lukla there at 2,850 meters. The only way to get to Lukla is flying. You have to fly from Kathmandu to Lukla. And the trek basically goes from Lukla, following the line here, to Namche Bazaar. Namche Bazaar is a very significant junction at 3,443 meters. It carries on Tenguche Monastery, Pangbashi, Perishe, you can see there, Lobashe, that's a very big one, Gorakshep, and then finally Everest Base Camp there at 5,365 meters.
Hi, so it's the end of day one. I've reached Monjo, which is between Lukla and Namche Bazaar, and it's been great. It was a great day. I'm feeling good, legs are feeling good, but I do need to simplify my bag a little bit. I want to repack it so I can get stuff in and out a little bit easier, because it's quite full.
There's very few treks in the world that you can do solo without a guide and without a group. If you have experience and you're a decent trekker, you are very, very capable of doing it solo. You do not need a guide, and that is fantastic because you can save a ton of money. Also, there's many different choices of accommodation along the route. They're called tea houses.
Tea house over there where I'm staying tonight, and it's just 100 Nepali rupees for a room, which is amazing because that's just like £1. It's less than £1 even, which is, it's unreal.
And they offer everything from accommodation to food and drink, everything that you need. And these are very plentiful on the Everest trek, all the way up to just before the base camp. There are many tea houses where you can stay. The trail is very well marked. You won't get lost. There's always locals around, lots of other people that you can ask if you feel like you need directions. The tea houses always have food and drink available. That means normal drinks and alcoholic drinks, food, various different types of food, not just the local Nepali food, but they've got various different variations of Western food, pizzas, pasta, cakes, all the fun stuff. It's very well supplied, this whole trek. Anything that you want, you can pretty much get anything on this trek. It's very good in that way. You will never have problems with supplies. The absolute best things about this trek, the views. The scenery is spectacular. There are some incredible viewpoints. Mountains that you will never see anywhere else. This size, the sheer size. It doesn't compare to anywhere else. It is next level stuff. It is absolutely incredible.
I'm right at the base of Mount Everest. That there is Mount Everest there, that one. That there. This is the closest I've ever been. It's the closest you can get really, like as a walker. Right now this is about maybe 5,500 meters or so on Kalapata.
The other great thing about this trek is because of the abundance of tea houses and places to stay, you can take as long as you want. You don't have to stick to any specific time. You can take a week, you can take 2 weeks, some people even take 3 or 4 weeks. You can stay as long as you like, and there is no rush. You can go at your own pace. Now for the Everest Base Camp trek and back, most people take about 12 days. I did it in about 9 days. I was okay with that pace. Some people did it even quicker than me. I met some people that did it in 5 days, but I would recommend taking at least 9 days because then you are acclimatizing, doing it at the right speed. Now this is going up to some pretty serious altitude, 18,000 feet, 18,500 feet. This is not a small height, this is very high. When you get up there, there will be serious oxygen problems. A lot of people will not be able to breathe as well as they would down in the cities. So it is very important that you do not go too fast. Do not ascend more than 1,000 meters in one day. Don't go fast. You need to take it slow, go very slowly so that you are fully acclimatizing. If you feel you're getting sick, you have to rest. Don't carry on any further until you're better, because most people will suffer from some form of altitude sickness on this trek. It is a very, very high trek. Don't let the accessibility and the abundance of facilities fool you. This is a difficult trek. It's not easy. Even if you're a good trekker, it is long and it is high. The other thing that was difficult is the cold. I went in November and it was extremely cold. I was suffering constantly. It is very difficult to keep warm when it is -15, -20, and there's no central heating or anything, don't forget. You are out in the elements. It is very, very cold. That was one of the hardest things. When you combine the extreme cold with the lack of oxygen, then you're in for a very tough time. Do not underestimate the difficulty of this trek.
Almost at Lovershade, which is like about touching 5,000 meters, 16,000 feet or so. Oxygen levels dropped pretty drastically in this last hill coming up here. I'm just trying to acclimatise and stay warm wherever possible. It's amazing, a hell of a lot of time during high altitude trekking is purely acclimatizing, which is just letting your body adapt to the lack of oxygen and the temperature. The cold is very difficult to deal with, and at 5,000 meters the oxygen is half what it is at sea level, so you basically have to take 2 breaths just to get the right amount of oxygen that you would normally get in 1 breath down in the city. Simple tasks become very difficult. Just getting changed and walking a few steps, you're absolutely exhausted within a few minutes. It's just, the air is so thin.
Having said that, I think anybody that has had some experience, especially up to 3,000 meters, 4,000 meters trekking, you'll definitely be able to do Everest Base Camp if you take the proper precautions. I wouldn't say a first timer should do this trek. It's a bit too difficult for a first timer.
So if you can see there Mount Everest, which is this one here, that's Mount Everest, and directly beneath there is that's the Khumbu Icefall. You can see the ice there, and that is basically the climb from base camp up to Camp 1. It's the most dangerous section on the entire climb, because if any of that ice shifts, it causes an avalanche, because the base camp is directly beneath that. You can't see it from here because we're above the base camp, but directly beneath.
The highlights for me were Namche Bazaar. Namche Bazaar is a fantastic town. You can spend a whole day there. They've got everything. You can go to cafes, you can go to bars. They've got Irish pubs, believe it or not. You can actually have Guinness up there. It's incredible. That map that's on my wall, I picked that up in Namche Bazaar. You can get anything there. It's absolutely brilliant. The Tenguche monastery, which is a couple of stops after Namche Bazaar, that is the monastery where Ed Hillary and Tenzing Norgay got their blessings just before they went for their ascent. Now, one little bit of advice that I'll give: most people go to Everest Base Camp in the afternoon, and then they do an early morning start for Kalapatar. So Kalapatar is the actual highest point, and Everest Base Camp is the end of the trail. From both places, the last place where you can sleep in a tea house is Gorak Shep. I'll give you some advice: do it the other way around. That's what I did. I went for Kalapatar summit in the afternoon, and then the following morning at 4 AM I went for Everest Base Camp, and I had Everest Base Camp completely to myself. There was nobody else there.
So this is Everest Base Camp. It's the 21st of November. It's about 7 in the morning, and just down there is the Everest Base Camp. Oh, this whole area really. That's the Khumbu Icefall going up there, and then that's the summit, the peak on the right. It looks shorter in the video, but that's actually Everest.
The entire area was dead quiet, silent. It was just perfect.
Khumbu Icefall, you can see, and then the Everest peak there. Hang on. That one, yeah. There's nobody about as well, which is strange. They said that there'd be a lot of people going to base camp, but there wasn't. Yeah, Mount Everest. Where is it? There. There you go.
Now, the busiest time for this trek is April, May, and September, October, okay? During that time, it's going to be a lot busier. It might be a little bit harder to get accommodations, and it will be busier. You don't want a busy trail, okay? I did it in November. It was busy enough for the most part, but it was not as busy. I never had any problem getting accommodation or getting anything, any supplies or anything like that. The only downside with November was it was much, much colder than it would have been at the peak times. But I was willing to sacrifice that for the solitude because I like peace and quiet and I like less crowds. So I would say November was a pretty good month. And if you're very adventurous, you can do it in the winter. It's going to be way harder in the winter because it'll be even colder and there'll be snow. But you can do it year-round, this trek, basically. You can do it at any time of the year. This is an absolute must-do. I'm so glad that I went there. It was on my bucket list, Mount Everest Base Camp, and I'm so glad that I went there. It is one of the best experiences I ever had in my life. In terms of treks, it's like top 3 treks that I've ever done. It is a phenomenal trek, absolutely A-star material. You have to go and do Everest Base Camp.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's so nice. Look at the mountains.
Thanks for watching.